If you're an Aquarius and lately you've been quieter than usual, not sad, not angry, just pulled inward. This message didn't find you by accident. Something in your life is shifting. And instead of reacting, your soul chose silence. You may not be talking as much, you may not be explaining yourself anymore. And part of you knows, this isn't weakness, this is awareness. Before we go deeper, type I receive in the comments as a way of opening yourself to this message. Because what's happening right now isn't the end of a chapter. It's the moment right before everything starts to make sense. Stay with me. Lately, it may feel like the world around you is moving faster than you can keep up with. Conversations, expectations, noise. Everyone seems to be rushing somewhere. And yet inside you, something has slowed down. Not in a tired way, not in a giving up way, but in a way that feels deliberate, like your inner world pressed a quiet button. If you've been wondering why you don't react the way you used to, why you're not rushing to explain yourself anymore, why silence feels more natural than speaking, there's a reason for that. You're not falling behind, you're recalibrating. There's a moment in life when growth doesn't feel exciting. It feels heavy, uncertain, like standing in between two places, not fully where you were, but not yet where you're going. And that space can feel uncomfortable. Your mind may be busy right now, pulled in different directions, thinking about responsibilities, about time, about what's next. You might feel tired without knowing why, restless but not motivated to move. Questioning things you once accepted without hesitation. That doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It means something important is rearranging itself inside you. So instead of pushing forward, you were guided to pull back, not to hide, not to disappear, but to see more clearly. When everything gets quiet, you start to notice things you couldn't hear before. You begin to sense who actually stands with you, not just when it's convenient, but when it's real. You feel which efforts nourish you, and which ones quietly drain you. And you recognize which battles were never meant to be yours to fight, even if you've been carrying them for a long time. This is the kind of pause that brings wisdom, not the kind that weakens you. For someone like you, silence isn't emptiness, it's information. It's your inner world asking for space, so it can reorganize what truly matters. You don't need to force clarity right now. You don't need to have answers ready. This moment isn't asking you to decide. It's asking you to notice. Notice what feels heavier than it should. Notice where your energy naturally pulls away. Notice what no longer feels worth explaining. That awareness is not accidental, it's protective. Because when life prepares you for something new, it often begins by removing the noise. And as you stay here, listening, breathing, allowing things to settle, you may start to feel it. A subtle shift, a quiet knowing. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady. Like standing at the edge of something unseen, knowing you don't have to rush forward, because when the moment comes, you'll recognize it instantly. And that's where I want you to remain with me for a little longer, right here, in this stillness. Because what's forming beneath the surface has more meaning than you realize. And as things quiet down around you, you may start to notice another feeling rising. Subtle at first, almost easy to ignore. Pressure, not always loud. Sometimes it shows up as tension in a room, a strange shift in how people speak to you. A sense that you're being watched, measured, compared. You might feel it in conversations that suddenly feel heavier. In moments where you realize someone is no longer simply listening, but weighing themselves against you. And if you've picked up on that lately, trust yourself, because you're not imagining it. But here's the part I want you to hear clearly. That pressure was never meant to stop you. It arrived to show you something you couldn't see before. At some point, you stopped reacting the way you used to. You didn't rush to defend yourself. You didn't explain your intentions. You didn't try to win. You simply stepped back. And in doing so, you discovered something important. You're stronger than you realized. Not in a loud way, not in a confrontational way, in a grounded way. There was a time when competition pulled you in, when proving your worth felt necessary, when staying engaged in certain dynamics felt unavoidable. But now, those same situations feel different, not threatening, just unnecessary. That's not weakness, that's discernment. You're learning that not every challenge deserves your energy. Not every comparison deserves your attention. Not every tension deserves your response. And that kind of wisdom usually comes only after experience, after disappointment, after realizing how much energy you've spent fighting battles that led nowhere. There's a calm confidence forming in you now, one that doesn't need to be announced. Aquarius energy was never meant to be loud to be powerful. Your strength has always lived in clarity, in vision, in knowing when to step forward and when to step away. So if you've noticed yourself disengaging from certain dynamics, choosing peace over proving a point, choosing silence over argument, it doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care differently now. You've outgrown environments that thrive on tension. You've outgrown situations where your value had to be questioned for someone else to feel secure. And that growth may feel lonely at times. Because when you stop participating in unnecessary conflict, some people don't know how to reach you anymore. But what you gain in return is something far more valuable. Your energy, your focus, your sense of self. This is the phase where you begin to recognize your power not by how much you can endure, but by how intentionally you choose where to stand. You don't need to announce your boundaries. You don't need to justify your distance. The fact that you no longer feel pulled into every storm is proof that something inside you has settled. And as that steadiness takes root, you may sense a shift coming. Not forced, not rushed, just a quiet alignment, where the noise falls away and what truly matters begins to come into view. Stay right here with that feeling. Because what's emerging now isn't about resistance anymore. It's about direction. And somewhere inside that steadiness, another feeling may have started to surface. A strange kind of numbness. Not sadness. Not depression. Just a dull quiet where excitement used to live. You might notice that things you once wanted badly no longer pull at you the same way. Conversations feel repetitive. Screens hold your attention longer than people. Messages sit unanswered. Not out of avoidance, but because responding feels heavier than it should. And maybe late at night, you catch yourself comparing where you are to where you thought you would be by now. That gap can feel disappointing, disorienting. But listen to me closely. This is important. None of this means you're doing life wrong. What's actually happening is far more subtle. You've grown faster than your surroundings. Your inner world has shifted. Your values have evolved. Your nervous system no longer responds to the same rewards. And when the outside world doesn't match that change yet, the result isn't motivation. It's numbness. That autopilot feeling isn't laziness. It's misalignment. You're not bored because life has nothing to offer. You're bored because what you're being offered no longer feeds you. There's a difference. Your heart isn't asking for more stimulation. It's asking for meaning. So distractions become easier than engagement. Scrolling becomes simpler than connecting. Pulling back feels safer than pretending interest. And without realizing it, you begin conserving your energy. This is the part most people misunderstand. They think something is wrong when joy fades. They think they need to push harder, try more, fix themselves. But this quiet disinterest is often a sign of intelligence, of self-respect. It's your inner compass refusing to light up for things that don't belong on your path anymore. There may be something in your life you've been tolerating, not because it fulfills you, but because it feels familiar, because it once made sense, because letting go feels uncertain. And now, even though it still looks fine on the surface, your soul has quietly outgrown it. That's why forcing excitement feels impossible. Why pretending drains you? Why rest doesn't always feel restful? You're in a holding space, a pause that isn't empty, a stillness that's preparing something. This is where old patterns loosen their grip, where outdated desires fall silent, where you begin to feel the absence of what's next before it fully arrives. And I know that can feel unsettling, because humans like motion, like proof, like direction. But some of the most meaningful shifts happen when nothing seems to be happening at all. So if you've been wondering why your energy feels muted, why enthusiasm hasn't returned, why you feel detached from things that used to define you, try asking yourself this instead. What have I been outgrowing quietly? What am I no longer willing to tolerate just to feel secure? You don't need answers right now, just honesty. Because the moment you stop forcing yourself to fit into an old version of life, something begins to rearrange behind the scenes. And as that rearrangement takes shape, you may start to sense it. Not as excitement yet, but as a subtle pull. A reminder that this quiet phase isn't a dead end, it's a reset. And if you stay with that awareness just a little longer, you'll feel where your energy naturally wants to go next. There's a reason you haven't been forcing yourself to smile lately. A reason you've stopped pretending everything is fine. A reason the silence feels more honest than saying, I'm okay. You don't need to pressure yourself to be upbeat, or enthusiastic, or reassuring to others. That urge to go quiet isn't avoidance, it's protection. Because somewhere along the way, you started to notice how much you were enduring without questioning it. How often you stayed in situations simply because they felt familiar, safe, predictable. And now, something inside you is asking a different question. What have I been tolerating longer than I should have? Not out of love, not out of purpose, but out of habit. That question doesn't come to people who are asleep in their lives. It comes when awareness sharpens, when your inner world expands beyond what once fit. There may be something you've been holding on to because it once protected you, a role, a dynamic, a version of yourself that helped you survive a different chapter. But survival isn't the same as alignment, and your soul knows the difference. So instead of pushing forward the way you used to, you slowed down. You pulled back. You stopped feeding energy into things that felt heavy. That choice wasn't random. It was intelligent, because when life is about to shift, it often asks you to pause first, to clear space, to stop investing in what cannot come with you. You might feel like you're waiting right now, not for a person, not for permission, but for clarity. And while waiting can feel uncomfortable, it's also where protection lives. You're being kept from stepping into what's next with outdated expectations, old attachments, expired identities. What's aligning behind the scenes requires a different version of you. A quieter one. A more honest one. One who doesn't override their intuition just to keep things smooth. So if you felt less social, less reactive, less available to chaos, that doesn't mean you're withdrawing from life. It means you're choosing how you enter it. This kind of silence creates a boundary without explanation. It keeps your energy intact while something more fitting takes shape. You may not see it yet, but pieces are moving. Connections are rearranging. Opportunities are waiting for the version of you that doesn't rush. And the reason it feels subtle is because it's meant to arrive gently. Not through force. Not through struggle, but through alignment. This is the moment where you stop trying to make sense of everything, and instead allow things to reveal themselves in their own timing. You're not being asked to act yet. You're being asked to listen. To notice what brings a quiet sense of relief when you imagine letting it go. To notice what no longer feels worth carrying into another season. That awareness is doing more work than you realize. Because when the time comes to move again, you won't move out of fear, or obligation, or habit. You'll move because something feels unmistakably right. And until then, this stillness isn't empty right. It's intentional. A soft holding place. Where the old releases its grip, and the new finds room to enter. Stay here with me just a little longer. There's something ahead that meets you exactly as you are now. As you rest in that stillness, something unexpected begins to stir. Not loud, not urgent, just a gentle interruption. It may arrive as a message you were not waiting for. A name lighting up your screen that you thought belonged to the past. An invitation that feels oddly familiar, yet unfamiliar at the same time. Or a conversation that opens itself without effort. What matters isn't the form it takes. It's the feeling it brings with it. A sense of recognition. A pause in your breath. That quiet moment where something inside you says, this feels different. There was a time when you believed that door had closed for good. You accepted it. You adjusted. You told yourself it wasn't meant for you. And in many ways, you were right. It wasn't meant for the version of you that existed back then. The one who doubted their timing. The one who rushed to prove readiness. The one who questioned whether they were enough. But you're not that person anymore. Time has reshaped you. Experience has softened your edges without taking your strength. You've learned discernment where you once had urgency. You've gained clarity where you once had hope alone. So when this moment returns, it doesn't feel overwhelming. It doesn't feel intimidating. It feels calm. You see it clearly now. Without fantasy, without fear. You understand what it offers. And just as importantly, what it does not. This isn't about correcting the past. It's about meeting something familiar from a new place within yourself. And you don't need to chase it. You don't need to rush toward it. What's meant to align with you now moves at your pace. That's how you'll know the difference. The right opportunity does not demand urgency. It invites presence. It doesn't ask you to abandon who you've become. It recognizes you as you are. You might notice that your response feels steadier than you expected. Less reactive. More grounded. There's no need to convince yourself. No need to talk yourself into it. You're listening to how your body responds. To whether your energy expands or contracts. To whether peace stays with you after the moment passes. This is what growth looks like in real time. Not fireworks. Not drama. Just a quiet sense of readiness. You're no longer drawn to things simply because they once mattered. You're drawn to what resonates now. And that discernment is the gift of everything you've been through. So if something circles back into your life, don't assume it's a test, or a mistake, or a step backward. Sometimes life revisits you not to repeat itself, but to see who you've become. And as you stay open, without forcing meaning, you may realize that this reconnection is less about the opportunity itself, and more about the confirmation it brings. That you've changed, that you're ready in a different way, that you trust yourself now. And when you notice that trust settling in, steady and unshaken, you'll feel it. That quiet confidence. That sense of alignment. Not because everything is clear yet, but because you are. And from that place, whatever opens next will meet you with the same calm recognition. Just stay present. There's more unfolding around you than you can see right now. I want you to listen closely to this part. Because this isn't about becoming more independent. You've already mastered that. There was a stretch of time where you carried everything on your own. You learned how to be self-contained, how to think for yourself, how to hold it together even when no one really understood what you were carrying. And for a while, that worked. But isolation has a way of quietly convincing you that doing everything alone is the same as being strong. That needing no one is safer than being disappointed again. That it's easier to stay contained than to risk being misunderstood. So you adapted. You kept your thoughts to yourself. You processed silently. You became selective with your energy and careful with your presence. What I want you to know is this: that season wasn't a mistake. It shaped you. But it was never meant to be permanent. The reason things feel like they're loosening now is because you're no longer meant to navigate this part of your life alone. Not because you can't, but because you don't have to. There's a difference. You didn't lack people. You lacked resonance. You weren't in the wrong. You were just in spaces that couldn't meet you where you were evolving. That's why you felt unseen even when you weren't invisible. Why conversations felt shallow even when people were present. Why you stopped sharing parts of yourself that felt too complex to explain. And now, slowly, that begins to change. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just a subtle opening. You may notice someone meeting you without questioning your depth. A room where you don't feel the need to edit yourself. An environment where your ideas don't need defending. And it may arrive casually, almost quietly. An invitation that feels unassuming. A conversation that lingers longer than expected. A connection that doesn't ask you to shrink. This isn't about belonging everywhere. It's about belonging somewhere real. The kind of space where you don't have to perform clarity. Where your silence isn't misread. Where your insight is welcomed instead of challenged. You don't need to force yourself to socialize more. You don't need to suddenly become open in ways that feel unnatural. Just stay receptive. When something invites you without pressure, without urgency, without expectation, consider saying yes. Not because you owe anyone access, but because growth often arrives through connection when we're finally ready to receive it. One conversation can realign your direction. One shared moment can soften the edges you didn't realize were holding tension. You are not meant to be surrounded by noise. You are meant to be surrounded by understanding. And as you allow yourself to step into spaces that reflect who you are now, you may feel a quiet relief. Like exhaling without realizing you were holding your breath. This is where collaboration replaces endurance. Where shared presence replaces self-reliance. Where support doesn't feel like dependence, but like alignment. You're not being asked to give up your independence. You're being invited to let it coexist with connection. And as that balance begins to settle, you may sense it. A gentle warmth. A feeling of being met. Not because you changed who you are, but because you finally allowed yourself to be seen where you belong. I want to slow this moment down for you, because this part matters more than you realize. For a long time, your effort was about survival. Getting through the day. Holding things together. Making sure nothing fell apart if you stopped pushing. You learned how to stay productive even when you were exhausted. How to keep going even when rest felt undeserved. How to measure your worth by how much you could carry. And if you're honest, there were moments when it felt like no matter how much you gave, it was never quite enough. You worked hard. You showed up. You stayed responsible. Yet the finish line kept moving. That constant motion can wear a person down quietly, not in dramatic ways, but in the slow erosion of joy. In the way days blur together. In the feeling that you're always catching up but never arriving. If you felt that kind of burnout, know this. It wasn't because you lacked discipline. It was because you were doing too much alone. And something in you is finally ready to change that pattern. You're not here to just keep things afloat anymore. You're here to build something that lasts. Something that reflects who you are now, not who you had to be just to get by. That shift doesn't happen through force, it happens through clarity. You begin to notice where your effort actually creates growth, where it disappears into obligation, where it drains you, and where it quietly nourishes you. You start choosing quality over urgency, structure over chaos, consistency over exhaustion. Not because you're slowing down, but because you're becoming more intentional. This is where smarter effort replaces constant striving, where you stop reacting to every demand and start responding to what truly matters. You may feel yourself setting clearer boundaries, reorganizing your priorities, letting go of the belief that rest must be earned through suffering. And perhaps for the first time in a long while, your work begins to feel meaningful again. Not because it's louder, but because it's aligned. You're beginning to see that your contribution matters. That what you bring to the table isn't replaceable. That your insight, your presence, your consistency have a real impact. And you don't have to prove that by overextending yourself anymore. Support starts to appear where it was missing before. Not as rescue, but as collaboration. People who understand your rhythm. Systems that actually work with you. A pace that allows you to breathe while still moving forward. This is the difference between effort that depletes and effort that builds. One drains your future, the other invests in it. So if you sense a quiet shift in how you approach your responsibilities, if you feel less urgency and more discernment, if you're redefining what success looks like for you, that's not hesitation, that's wisdom. You're stepping out of survival mode, out of constant reaction, into a space where your energy is respected, including by you, and as that respect settles in, you may feel something unfamiliar but welcome. A sense of stability. Not because everything is finished, but because you're no longer running from yourself. This is where effort becomes purposeful, where progress feels sustainable, where your work begins to support your life instead of consuming it. And as that balance takes hold, you'll notice how much lighter it feels to move forward without carrying everything on your own. I want to leave you with something gentle tonight, something meant just for you. If you've chosen silence lately, it isn't because you ran out of words. It's because you stopped offering them to places that couldn't hear you. You didn't withdraw from life. You withdrew from noise. There's a difference. You've reached a point where honesty matters more than being understood by everyone, where truth feels lighter than constant explanation, and that choice says more about your growth than any achievement ever could. Somewhere ahead of you, there are spaces you haven't stepped into yet that will recognize you immediately. Rooms where your presence won't need justification. People who will feel your depth without asking you to prove it. Your voice will matter there. Not because it's louder, but because it's clear. You carry a perspective shaped by experience, by reflection, by having lived quietly with your own thoughts long enough to know what matters. And even if you can't see those connections yet, they are already moving toward you, aligning, waiting for the moment you arrive as yourself, without armor, without performance. This is why your energy is shifted. Why you're less interested in rushing. Why you're no longer chasing validation. You're preparing space. Space for something new to begin, not from pressure, but from alignment. It doesn't have to be a dramatic reinvention. It can start small, almost unnoticed. A curiosity you allow yourself to follow. An idea you stop dismissing. A quiet project you begin without needing approval. Not to prove your worth, but to honor it. You were never meant to mirror the world around you. You were meant to contribute something different, something thoughtful, something real. And that contribution doesn't need an audience right away. It needs sincerity. Let yourself explore again. Without urgency, without expectation. Let yourself create, or learn, or build. From a place of calm curiosity rather than pressure. That's where your true nature feels most at home. You don't need to announce what you're becoming. You don't need to explain the path you're choosing. Those who are meant to walk alongside you will recognize you without words. And as you move forward, carrying less noise, less obligation, and more truth, you may notice something subtle but powerful. A quiet sense of belonging, not to a place, not to a role, but to yourself. That's when things begin to unfold naturally, when effort feels lighter, when connections feel easier, when life stops asking you to perform and starts inviting you to participate. Stay gentle with yourself. Stay honest with your energy. You're not late. You're not lost. You're arriving. Before you go, I want you to notice something. You stayed. You listened. And something in you softened along the way. That's not accidental. If this message reached you tonight, it's because a part of you was already ready to hear it. Not ready to change everything. Not ready to have all the answers. Just ready to trust yourself again. That quiet voice inside you, the one that doesn't shout, the one that doesn't rush, the one that knows when to pause, that voice is real. And it's been guiding you this whole time. You don't need permission to honor it. You don't need approval to follow it. You only need the courage to listen, especially when the world gets loud. If something in this message resonated with you, leave a comment and write, "I trust myself, not for me, for you." And if you're Aquarius, or if you simply carry that Aquarian energy, the kind that thinks deeply, feels quietly, and moves differently, know this. You're not alone here. This is a space for those who feel deeply but speak selectively, for those who've outgrown noise but still believe in connection. If you'd like to stay connected, make sure you subscribe. Not just for future messages, but for the reminder that your journey doesn't have to be walked in silence. Because this isn't the end of the conversation. What you felt tonight is only the beginning of a larger unfolding. Another message is already forming. Another moment of clarity is on its way. And when it arrives, it will meet you exactly where you are. Until then, be gentle with your energy. Be honest with your truth. And remember, the quieter you become, the more clearly you hear where you're meant to go next. I'll be right here when you're ready.